The Oakland County Campaign for Liberty spotlights each month real American heroes, people fighting for the rights of all Americans. This episode, our guest is former Detroit TV anchor Anqunette Jamison Sarfoh.
Former Fox 2 anchor Anqunette Jamison Sarfoh has plans.
I want to make sure that people have access to all types of safe tested medications, and we're hoping to provide that here.
Speaking of interesting, our next speaker is Anqunette Sarfoh Jamison. She was the #1 television personality at Fox 2 Detroit. She's been interviewed by the #1 political TV talk show in Oakland County, Tough Talk with Teros, and she's the #1 speaker on marijuana-related issues in Oakland County. Ladies and gentlemen, please a big round of applause for Anqunette Sarfoh Jamison.
Well, first, thank you for having me. And I want to start off by showing what I was really, really proud of about 4 years ago. This is my CPL. I got this because, for a number of reasons. First, I was going through a divorce and my ex-spouse threatened me. So I went down to the Oakland County Courthouse and I got a PPO. I was awarded a PPO. During my job at Fox, I did the fitness segment. And one time I would do the fitness segment, or every time I would do the fitness segment, a man would call and he would say how he wanted to drag me into an alley and rape me. Yeah, so made sure I got a PPO. And then there was the guy who came to the station looking for me because he was convinced that I was the mother of his child. And I've never had a child, so I know I'm not the mother of his child. And so I was lucky that the Farmington Hills Police Department started surveilling my house when that happened. And again, I had a CPL, and I also had a Smith & Wesson 9mm shield that I really, really liked. Thanks. And I learned how to use it because you have to go through 8 hours of training to get your CPL. But most importantly, I was really proud of getting my CPL because I felt that it put me on par with my husband, who is a Marine Corps sniper. So it doesn't put me on par with my husband, but in my mind, I'm like, yeah, you can drop me in anywhere and I can, put on a gully suit and, yeah, take out people. But that didn't happen. So I was a proud, legal, gun-carrying citizen, and then I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And so let's tell you about my diagnosis. I was a pretty healthy person. I still consider myself to be a healthy person, but I've completed marathons. I used to teach spinning, and I would walk my dogs 4 miles a day. And when I was walking my dogs, my feet would fall asleep, or I would be watching TV and my hands would fall asleep. And then one day I was walking into my kitchen bringing in groceries, and I face planted. My legs just stopped working, and I face planted on my kitchen floor instantly. And at that point I was like, that's not right. At the time, I was on Adderall because I was having memory issues, and I went to a psychiatrist because my doctor could not prescribe Adderall for ADD. She thought I had adult onset ADD, and so she said, I'm going to send you to a psychiatrist, and he's going to put you on Adderall, and that should take care of your memory issues. Well, and then I fell in my kitchen, and I realized that there's something else going on besides me possibly having adult ADD. And so I did what everyone does when they feel they may have a life-altering and very serious disease. I went to WebMD, and I took a quiz, the Do You Have MS quiz, because there is a quiz on WebMD, Do You Have MS? And I scored 8 out of 10. And I took this course or this test during a commercial break, by the way. I was anchoring the news with Sherry, and there was a contestant on Dancing with the Stars, and she had just dropped out of the competition because she had been diagnosed with MS. And she started talking about her symptoms, and I said, that sounds like me. So we Googled WebMD, and in the commercial break, I'm taking the test, and bam, I guess I should see a doctor about this. So because it's rare for African Americans to actually have MS. However, in Detroit, that's not the case. There is an unusual number number of African Americans in Detroit, Houston, and Philadelphia who are coming down with MS. So, but because it's rare for African Americans to have MS, I made a point to see a specialist down at DMC, and took me 3 months to get in to see this guy. I went in and he put me through all the paces, and he said, "I don't think you have MS. Why do you think you have MS?" So obviously I have hypochondria now. And I said, well, it's unusual for my feet to fall asleep when I'm walking, and I have no memory whatsoever. It's frightening, especially the later it gets at night. I have no memory. So let's just do an MRI anyway, because, hey, I have insurance. And so they did the MRI, and as I was driving to the west side of the state on a Saturday afternoon, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize, and it was the neurologist saying, "When I see scans like yours in someone under 70 years old, I'm concerned." So I started crying. I go and pick up my puppy, and I go back to the doctor's office, and that's when the pharmaceuticals began. So let's talk about these pharmaceuticals. This is the disease-modifying treatment called Copaxone. When it was introduced about 22 years ago, it was about $6,000. Now it's $91,000 a year. It's an injection every 3 days a week. $91,000 a year if you have insurance. If you don't have insurance, guess what? You're not on this drug. But of course, this is just a disease-modifying treatment. Notice, there are no cures anymore. This is just to modify your disease, to slow it down, to reduce your relapse rate. Okay, so you have that, but it doesn't cure your disease, and in fact, it causes a lot of side effects. And so for the side effects, that's when they have all the other things. So, this one is Prozac. This one is, my thyroid, because that's the first to go when they put you on all these things. Flexeril, a muscle relaxant. Trazodone to help me sleep. That's the one I forgot this morning. And Baclofen, another muscle relaxant. Adderall. Now, even though I only have one vial of Adderall, there are two types in here because I needed two types of Adderall. I needed instant release to get me out of bed, and then extended release to get me through the day. And then, because everything will make you nauseated, Zofran, which these are great because these are great anti-nausea pills, but ginger also works, just FYI. So yeah, nine medications. I went from running marathons and teaching spinning to taking 9 medications, and it would have been okay if the medications made me feel better. But they didn't. Instead, they made me sicker. They made me so sick, and I'm glad that the pizza isn't here because we're just going to get personal. I was so sick that I was vomiting all the time. I would wake up, and before I would go to work, I would throw up. I would get to work sometimes, and they would look at me and say, "Girl, just go on home." On my mom's 65th birthday, she spent the morning of her birthday in the hospital with me because I had thrown up 10 times before we decided to go ahead and go to the hospital. By the way, if you throw up 3 times in a row, that's when you should go to a hospital. Me, it was 10 times in 3 hours. It was horrible. So, I was having episodes like that quite often. I was taken to the hospital and pumped with morphine and intravenous muscle relaxants to get my stomach from convulsing. And after the 3rd trip to the hospital, my husband said, "Why don't you just smoke a joint?" And I was like, seriously? But at that point, when you're throwing up in a ditch in the rain on the way to the hospital, you're just like, let me try that joint. And I tried that joint, and I was amazed. I couldn't believe it. And I instantly felt that I had been lied to, because I believed in our medical industry and I believed in the doctors. And as I've gone on this journey, I realized that doctors, I blamed them a lot at first, and now I don't so much anymore, because the whole system is rigged to keep information away from them. They can't study it. It's illegal. So it's not necessarily their fault. But when I smoked that one joint, and I realized that, first of all, the nausea went away. And then I realized I used to get headaches at 10:30 every day, which is why I stopped doing the 11 o'clock news. It was easier for me to come in at 4 o'clock in the morning because I had insomnia anyway. And my headaches would start at 10:30 like clockwork, so I didn't want to do the 11 o'clock news anymore. So I switched my schedule and everything. But, second. So I'd smoked that joint, and the headaches were gone, the nausea was gone. But what really surprised me more than anything was that cannabis, and I say the word cannabis, and we can talk about that later. It's a long story, but I use the word cannabis because that's the medical, that's the legal, that's the official Latin terminology. That's this medical term. But it gave me energy. And I was at the point where when I went to see this neurologist, I was already up to 80 milligrams of Adderall. And the standard dose of Adderall is about 10 to 15. So when my neurologist saw that I was on 80 milligrams of Adderall, which, by the way, spiked my blood pressure 40 points, he said, we need to take you off of all of that Adderall. But at that point, I needed it because I was exhausted all the time, which is a symptom of multiple sclerosis. So I smoked this joint, and all of a sudden, I have energy. I have energy to, after my full day of work, I mopped my floors. And I have black floors and 2 dogs. So mopping my floors is an ordeal. And I realized that this particular strain, called Gorilla Glue, made me no longer need Adderall. So if I didn't need Adderall, I didn't need Zofran, I didn't need the muscle relaxants. So all of a sudden, I'm now cutting more and more and more of my pharmaceuticals. However, it didn't help my memory. And it didn't hurt my memory either, though, and that does happen with some people. But long-term effects, it has not affected my memory. But my memory was already damaged to the point where I and my doctors, my family, we all made the decision that it was in my best interest and also the interest of the show that I retire. My memory loss is of the kind, it's short-term memory loss, so I will forget what I'm saying as I'm saying it. And in stressful situations, it happens more frequently. And I just didn't want to embarrass myself. And I had, private disability insurance. Another story, another topic, another day. The things that they do on private disability insurance. But either way, so I decided to retire. And during my retirement, because I went on Facebook, people were wondering where I was because I went on short-term first, and we're working out dissolving my contract, basically. So after my 6-month waiting period ended, I announced that I was leaving. And I'm grateful that Fox made it a point to bring on a doctor to talk about my condition and why I was retiring, and also to talk about medical marijuana, because when I retired on Facebook, I said, by the way, I'm joining the fight to legalize marijuana. And this doctor, Dr. Gregory Barkley of Henry Ford Hospital, came on with us, and he said that cannabis had the same efficacy as many disease-modifying treatments, which is a 30% reduction in relapses. That was the last day I took Copaxone. It's like, so I save it now for things like this, because it's amazing when you see that 90,000. Oh, by the way, Copaxone is 4 amino acids in a solution. So great that this company discovered this, and it's, but it's 4 amino acids that you can get at GNC in a vial, and they charge your insurance companies $91,000 a year. So, and so then I decided to make cannabis my treatment full-time, and I discontinued the use of all other pharmaceuticals. However, because I decided to get that medical marijuana card, that meant that I'm no longer allowed to have a gun. I'm definitely, so I didn't even bother to reapply for my CPL because it's not going to be granted, and then I'm just on someone's list. But I hope that maybe when we leave this place, because I even asked Attorney General candidate Dana Nessel this very issue today, because she had a forum on medical marijuana advocates, and she wanted us to ask her questions. And it is the one question that I get over and over again. I'm married to a vet, and I'm married to a vet who became a vet to earn his citizenship in this country. So I'm married to a Russian, so I mean that's a great thing now, I guess. But yeah, so I have to give up my rights because I'm a patient, because I choose, and not just choose, but my body responds favorably to a plant over a pharmaceutical concoction. And because of that, I have to give up my Second Amendment right. And I am a vulnerable person. I have a disease that comes with mobility issues. I am a woman, and I have been threatened, and I am a target, and yet I am no longer allowed to defend myself because I have multiple sclerosis, and my disease responds best to cannabis. So I'm hoping that the intelligent minds in this room, we can all band together, and maybe we can all just write letters and do more than writing letters, because if people with mental issues are allowed to keep their guns, I don't understand why people with medical issues that respond positively to a plant that is non-toxic, why I have to give up my right to own and possess a firearm. So, thank you. And on top of that, just so you all know, my husband is a Gulf War veteran, and Gulf War veterans have a higher incidence of MS, and they don't know why. But I have quite a few veterans who reach out to me on Facebook, and they say, I'm sick, I'm in pain. And we're not even talking about PTSD, because these are also vets who have been helped by cannabis. But these are just people who are maybe in wheelchairs, they're infirm, they're elderly, and they know how to use a gun. And they say, my doctor is telling me I should try cannabis, but I have to give up my gun to try cannabis, and I'm not going to do that. Yes, sir.
I want to give you an arguing point for the next time you have a public forum to speak about this. Every single person in this room has what amounts to a medical alcohol card, and yet none of them are barred from
Correct.
The consequence of that, the prospect of
it disgusts me every day.
It's absolutely absurd.
It is. It is. Yes, sir.
Be candidate for Attorney General. I think it's a Democrat you mentioned, I don't recall her name. What was your response to your...
it's a federal issue.
Was she going to support that you could have your gun?
She can't. It's a federal issue. It's federal. It's a federal issue. It's that, and also I brought up Medicare because I have people who reach out to me, and they're Medicare and Medicaid recipients. Some of them are, like, for instance, a 25-year-old male who is in a group home with cerebral palsy, and he has seizures, and his condition responds favorably to CBD, which doesn't even get him high. But he is not allowed to bring it in that facility because that facility will lose their federal funding if they have a person using cannabis in their facility, even though the doctor says that it's the only thing that's keeping him from having 10 seizures a day.
That's insanity.
It is insanity, and this is what I hear day after day after day. Yes.
Do you know if Prop 1's passed in November, will that change any of this stuff?
Not at all. But I am in favor of passing Prop 1 because I feel they can't take all of our guns. You know, I'm on a list because I wanted to protect myself legally, and I wanted to use legally. And because of that, the federal government considers me to be a drug abuser. And that's the distinction. I'm not a user. If I am using federally illegal substances, I'm not a user, I'm an abuser. Right, and by admitting that I have a card, just by getting a card, I'm on a list, and I'm admitting to the federal government that I am a drug abuser. Yes.
Okay, you said you use medical marijuana. Like, when a person uses medical marijuana, do they get high? And if they do get high, does that impair anything else that you're doing?
Oh, well, there have been studies. Well, first of all, yes, some people do get high, some people don't get high. It depends on for example, I have one patient. His name is Ike McKinnon. He's a legal medical marijuana patient, and he's publicly said this, that I can say this because he spoke at my hearing where I'm opening a business, and he spoke at our hearing. He's 75 years old. He doesn't even drink. He's never had a sip of alcohol, and he was a police chief of Detroit for however many years, and he had 3 failed back surgeries. They had him on opioids for 15 years. They never worked. And so Huel Perkins said, you should call Q. And he called me and he said, I don't want to get high. And I said, well, you know what? You have to embrace the possibility of possibly getting high. And what do you think getting high is anyway? You think you're going to be like, twitching in a corner somewhere? And I said, it's like, have you had like a glass of wine? It's like, you have a puff. It's kind of like similar to a glass of wine for some people. Some people are very sensitive to THC, and it's more than that. But if you just had one puff, and it's like a glass of wine. So to answer your question, it depends on the person, and it depends on their use. Younger users, they're going to get higher because they have more receptors. And so younger users who are getting high, their abilities to be in control of a vehicle, all that kind of stuff, impaired. And by the way, I want to make this perfectly clear. I am not in favor. I am opposed to impaired driving. That's impairment for any substance, though. Pharmaceuticals, alcohol, and cannabis. No, I don't think you should be blazing in your car and driving down the lodge. That's illegal. Exactly. But there have been studies for people who are long-term users, and this has been on CNN. Sanjay Gupta, Weed 1, 2, and 3. They put them on courses, and you have. I'm a user for about 4 years now. I will always test positive, by the way, and so I don't feel that I'm impaired. I haven't used since last night, but I will test positive because I use every day, and it's in my fat. It's in my body. So studies have shown that people who use on a regular basis do not have impairment. Their bodies become accustomed to it in some kind of way, and I know that sounds really sketchy. However, that is what the study says. That's what the studies show, and CNN, Weed 1, 2, and 3, Sanjay Gupta, that's where you can find all that information. Yes, sir.
When it comes to medical marijuana, there's all these controversies about it. Why don't they just take the active ingredient and put it in a pill form?
And then a pharmaceutical company is going to charge you a heck of a lot of money for it, because they're already doing that, by the way. They are. There are quite a few drugs. Epidex was just approved by the FDA, and that's for kids with epilepsy. That has a tiny amount of THC and a lot of CBD. I want to get back to getting high, though. I want to get back to Ike. So anyway, I have been able we have been able to find some formulations that will not get him high, but relieve the pain. And that's what I have a lot of people who, usually older people, when they come to me, the first thing they say is, I don't want to get high. And there are things that you can do to not get high, but I hesitate to put this all in the hands of the pharmaceutical industry because I don't feel they're fair players. Also, this is a plant, and I'm a believer in plant medicine. I feel that turmeric is also beneficial, same thing with ginger. And if you can plant tomatoes in your backyard, you should be able to have a cannabis plant too. So yeah, it's just a plant. It's just a plant. And you have these people who say, well, no, we should just have the just the CBD because that helps. This is a plant, and God made it a certain way because all the components in these plants work synergistically. They work on each other. You need whole plant medicine to help a lot of conditions. So and drug companies, they isolate it and then they charge you a lot for it. But yes, so Epidex is one drug that's that has been granted FDA approval. They haven't even put out the price yet, but if you were to grow the strain ACDC or Canatonic, those are what the doctors on our advisory board are suggesting for their epilepsy patients. And you can grow that in your basement or your backyard, or you can buy it at a dispensary, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper than some drug company is going to sell it for. Yeah.
I have a friend who has Parkinson's.
Oh.
And she just recently got out of the medical marijuana. And she goes to a natural doctor, whatever. And anyway, they watched her when she first started to smoke it because she was getting really high.
Okay.
And she has to smoke it with the THC in it. The THC transports it to the cells.
And it also helps for tremors.
It helps tremendously. She is amazed at how marvelous she feels now. And she was on these drugs that were costing like nothing.
Right. So, however, I worked with a patient with Parkinson's, and she unfortunately she's no longer with us. But and she's also another reason why I am such an advocate for full legalization. This woman was 73 years old, and she had severe Parkinson's. I mean, she was shaking. She was exhausted. She was just shaking all the time, and her son took her to get a card, and she's in this room. And let's be realistic, a lot of people who have cards are getting cards for recreational reasons, and they look like they're in there getting cards for recreational reasons. And so she was like, this isn't my scene, this isn't my vibe, and this isn't me. And so she was put off by that. So we found another place, and we took her there, and but she also couldn't inhale. So her son was actually just blowing the vapor on her. And I believe in vaporizing, but vape smoke doesn't matter. But yeah, and so just in blowing the smoke blowing the vapor onto her, she got some relief. So if your friend is getting too high actually smoking it, maybe have somebody else do it, or also just switch her methods. If she's smoking, maybe she should switch to vaping, because she won't get as high, she won't get as much THC, she won't get as much of the cannabinoids when you vape as when you smoke, and it's also a little bit better on your lungs. She can also try tinctures. They last longer, drops under your tongue. She can make those herself, and she can get some RSO. We can talk. I'm getting into the weeds here. Okay. Yeah, exactly. The Volcano's so expensive, though.
Yeah, there's cheaper ones. We'll talk.
Yeah, the Arizer. I like the Arizer. I start people up on the Arizer handheld. It's $100. The Volcano is about $500. So, but it's great. That's what they use in CNN weed too, and that's what all the hospitals, all the clinical trials that are held. If they have clinical trials, they tend to use the Volcano, and that's the vaporizer. You have to inhale out of a bag, but it works, and it's the most clinical. So, yeah, okay. Oh, we're good? Okay. All right. Make sure I have okay.
You want to tell us?
Yeah. Right. So just real quick, I just want you guys to know, you can't see, if you want to know why doctors are necessarily, why some doctors may be against it, I feel that there is a tremendous financial motivation and incentive for these doctors. And they don't have this information available anymore, but it was a part of the Affordable Care Act that they had to publicize how much money doctors and teaching hospitals and universities were getting from drug companies. So in Michigan in particular, and I think this was like in 2014, $142 million paid to physicians, $14 million paid to U of M alone. So that's a part of the reason, yeah. Forfeiture, which I didn't get into. So do you guys know about civil asset forfeiture? But go ahead. Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you.
talk we heard from Anqunette Sarfoh was so informative and so moving and really heartrending and even angering when you think about what these people have to go through that have these afflictions, and all they're doing, trying to do, is exercise their natural rights granted by the Creator, like it says in the Declaration of Independence. We hold what truths to be self-evident? That all men are created equal and are granted certain inalienable rights, including the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But apparently our politicians hold different truths to be self-evident. And apparently our politicians think that the federal government can do whatever they want, including our candidates for Attorney General all over this country. The state governments are supposed to protect us against usurpations by the feds, but instead they actually are their co-conspirators. They actually are violating the law, helping the feds violate the law and attack our rights. And then we have groups that have dishonest and misleading names like Healthy and Productive Michigan when they are unhealthy and unproductive, and they are actively lobbying against the rights of the people of this state under false pretenses. And I'll tell you, if the founding fathers, if that generation, Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, the barefoot, bleeding, unpaid volunteers at Valley Forge heard or knew what was going on in this country today, what these politicians are pushing and what Healthy and Productive Michigan so-called is pushing, and the rest of them too, they would be loading their knapsacks, sharpening their bayonets, and taking to the streets. They would resist. We have the ability to resist peacefully, and it's about darn time that we did it. So that's my rant about that.